Regarding questions, you can ask them during the presentation. Feel free, if you are okay with unmuting your mic and speaking in the moment, totally go for it. Otherwise, there's a chat box and you can put your questions in there and Joe will look at them either during or after his presentation. So go ahead, Joe.
It'll actually be after. So hopefully, because this is my first time using Zoom, so I apologize if it's a little clunky or if I'm fumbling around. But I've asked Mara to be my designated interrupter, or if you guys are comfortable enough, just taking yourself off mute if you have a specific question, I'm happy to answer throughout. It's not really about the presentation. So, but I do want to open by sharing a very clear statement. I think it's important for everybody in ACAP, kind of for themselves to be clear about their motivations, about why they're in ACAP. And mine are pretty simple, and it's to do whatever I can to help this next wave of engineers, researchers, leaders, anybody in our community that I can help. I think that's the most that I can do with regard to my engagement with ACAP. I don't want to take ourselves too seriously tonight. I'm happy Kumpit is there with his guitar. I want to have some fun, but I can also go ultra nerdy on any of these topics either tonight or when anybody else decides to invite me to a cup of coffee in downtown Willoughby and talk about some of this stuff. Like I said, I do have a few slides that I can use to frame the discussion, but it's really much more important about what all of you want to get out of this session. So it's a discussion. Yeah, I'm used to using Microsoft Teams and there's a hand waving, like if you want to ask a question. So I'll just rely on you, Mara, to interrupt me if there's a question or if something goes weird with the presentation or my audio. So once again, thanks to ACAP for the invite for this session tonight. Let me see if I could advance these slides. So I was born and raised here in the Croatian community in Cleveland. I'm married to Romana Vujica, who's on the board, and God blessed us with 3 healthy children. Some of you may have already met my 12-year-old daughter, Nina, who's the owner of a company called So Simple. Nina really pays the bills in our house, and I just go to work for fun. But I have been working at Lubrizol for 20 years. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the things that I've learned with all of you tonight on the call. Nina did inform me that these things are recorded and posted on YouTube. So for all of those listening to the replay, feel free to email me. The link is right there afterwards. LinkedIn is something that I check like probably once every 5 or 6 weeks. I need to improve on that. So your best bet is just emailing me directly. So I didn't know who would be on the call. I wasn't sure if it was just going to be my wife and my nieces. And I didn't know what everybody's background was. So I'm happy to see some familiar faces, some folks that I don't know. And it's hard with such a wide variety of folks. But what I aim to do tonight is really introduce just a few leadership terms and themes. People have been researching and writing about and practicing any one of the topics that we're really going to skim tonight. And there's so many ways that you can approach this topic of leadership, lots of books and philosophies about this. And it really depends on where you're at on your own personal journey. So success for me tonight is just piquing your interest on something new and inspiring you to learn more. So before we get into some serious stuff, I want to play a game. And it's a game where I need some volunteers. So I'm going to need a couple people to take themselves off mute. And I'll try to expand so I could see who does that. I need somebody who's like the best DJ or who has the best playlists for parties on this call. Pete could be the best musician. So I'm going to volunteer Pete if you're willing and still there.
I'm in. I'm here.
Okay. Is Elizabeth listening?
She should be. She's on a different computer.
Okay. Elizabeth,
I'm here.
you're
Yep.
there?
I am.
So you guys are in different rooms in your house. Here's the game. Pete, you're going to think of a song.
Mhm.
And you're going to tap out the beat.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Can I volunteer somebody else to do this?
No humming. You can do Mata. Whoever wants to volunteer.
How about we have somebody else, since I'm on the board and
How about anybody? This is going to be Name That Tune. This is what we're going to do. Pete, you're a professional musician. Think of a
Okay.
good song and start tapping it out. Don't sing, don't hum, don't do anything. Just tap it out.
Do we know if it's Croatian or American? I'm just
Nope.
saying.
Nope.
Okay.
Just tap.
Man, you put me on the spot here.
I heard the first, but I can't hear any more now.
Yeah, I stopped.
Okay. Did anybody get it?
It could be any one of 1,000 songs.
You can hear it, right, Pete? You can hear it in your head.
Yes.
Can anybody else guess that song? I'm going to bet a lot of money that nobody can guess that song. This is cool. I've never done it with a professional musician.
I'm gonna go with no.
That's a no. Kathy, I think everybody would vote the same. Is anybody putting in the chat? I can't see the chat.
No, nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat. Pete, sorry. So what was the song?
It's a tune by Balkan Orchestra, and I actually don't know the name of the song. It's Hermetico. Hermetico is the name of the tune. It's an abstract.
I should have given more clear instructions. I should have given you a clear instruction to play a tune that everybody might know.
Okay.
Let's do that quickly. No, nothing from the sound. Just. Anybody? Still nobody. What's that one?
I Want to Dance with Somebody, Whitney Houston.
Good. So
Yeah,
you
it's hard
maybe
to
wanna-
guess any tunes without a melody. Yeah,
It
'cause
is.
yeah, you can play a drum track to any tune, and you can play that to 1,000 different songs without a melody and harmony. It's hard to pick out a song.
Right. So the point of this little silly game is really a lesson in communication. And the analogy really is like the knock and the tune is an idea that a leader could have in their head. And sometimes leaders walk around all day like knocking out the tune, and they're talking and they're thinking they're sharing some ideas, when in reality, they're not. Nobody else hears them. And that's one of my points that I want to make, and I'll repeat it later on, is how important communication is for a leader and for anybody. So you guys can play that game with your friends at the ACAP happy hour or once we get off this call. I'm going to continue. Leadership. Okay, so leadership can oftentimes seem like a contradiction, and I'll share more about that throughout. So things that worked for me may not actually work for you. And there's three reasons that I'll talk about today. I'm sure there's a lot more. The first is you got to be authentic. You know, people can sniff out BS and they can tell if you're fake pretty easy. Most of the people that all of you are working with are probably pretty smart folks, and they'll sniff that out. So you have to be authentic. The second reason is every human and every situation is different. Even similar situations, you really can't approach exactly the same way. This is something I'm still learning with. I think we all learn about that with each experience we have in our lives. The third thing is an important one, and that's every organization's culture and norms are really different. So you can work in a large established corporation or a small startup, and things might be different. You can be an informal versus a super formal culture. You can have a matrix organization versus a very rigid, narrow, hierarchical organization. And in each one of those organizations, things can work or things can't. And the point is, really, leadership is much more about the way you behave than it is about a position or a title. And that's why it can get you fired, because bad behavior can get you fired. And I'm sure you've all heard about or experienced firsthand leaders behaving ridiculously bad, disrespectful, egregious. And those leaders, and those behaviors may not necessarily be endorsed in that organization, but they're condoned. And that's where we get into this gray area. And I know that they'd be fired at Lubrizol, for instance, some of the things that I've heard. So a simple example from my experience years ago, when I was just beginning my formal leadership training at Lubrizol, we were actually taught to discriminate. And people were kind of falling out of their chairs when the instructor opened with that headline. And he went on to talk about, yes, you should discriminate based on performance. So it's kind of like meritocracy in a corporation. So you discriminate based on how people are performing. I know at Lubrizol we have a certain degree of latitude or discretion on various HR policies, but where that line is drawn is different everywhere you work. And one guy taught me many years ago, HR guides, but management decides. So this whole topic of leadership is really kind of, it depends kind of topic. I'm gonna try to hit advance. All right, so let's go to one of my favorite places, the bookstore. Leadership, I say leadership evolves, and you could label some of these classifications as fads, or you can simply appreciate them for being relevant for a given period of time. And again, there's loads of TED Talks, Harvard Business Review articles, smart work colleagues that you have that you can learn from, and plenty of books that are written about each one of these call outs. And let's just look at one of them. For example, today, situational leadership is an interesting one that we've been bouncing around at Lubrizol the past few years, and training some young leaders on this topic. It's one that highlights a common leadership trap. You've all heard about micromanagers, and it's almost cliche to say that micromanagement is a bad leadership style. Some would also argue the opposite. They'd say oftentimes you might need a bit more clarity or direction from your manager. And you could think back on your own experiences about when you've been in that position. And we can debate whether or not that's micromanagement or not. But situational leadership is basically about the leader matching the appropriate level of direction and support to the situation. So you're decoupling like the seniority of a person or a position from a specific task. And an example that I have from my career, I work with a lot of really smart scientists. Some are world experts on a particular scientific technique. And for the most part, they need very little direction, or there's very little direction that I could give to them in that particular technique, just lots of support, whether it's more resources or things like that. But I learned that sometimes they needed a bit more specific direction on a given activity, like running more effective meetings or tailoring presentations for certain audience. So I could coach them on those kinds of things and help them be more effective. And one of the lines that we use is you can be 100% correct, but 0% effective. And that's not really success for any leader or any team. Any questions on this or any of the other ones? Just shout. Otherwise, I'll keep moving. So the next slide, just calls out a few of the tools that leaders can take advantage of to help them do their job. Some of you may recognize these if you're already a leader or just getting into a leadership position. Any one of these threads can take us down to an extended discussion. For instance, the Myers-Briggs assessment that's in the center, that's been around for many years. That's a self-assessment tool for understanding your own and your team's communication style or preferences, similar to DISC or StrengthsFinder. For that one, I think I mentioned in one of those questionnaires that I just answered for ACAP, I think it was the monthly spotlight, around the fact that I'm a very off the charts kind of introvert. That would show up in a Myers-Briggs assessment, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a poor leader. And the point of this is basically saying there's things that you need to be aware of if you're in a leadership position in order to do your job well. Again, I'm happy to dig into any of these either now or at some future date. I'm gonna keep moving. Additional tips. So these are just some things that I've kind of registered in my mind over the years, working at Lubrizol and working in other different teams and groups. The first one is be introspective, know thyself. There's a reason they carved this in stone on a temple of Apollo in Greece. I think that's one of the most important things is to understand, and not just professionally, but personally as well. Solicit feedback. Lots of way to do this. I guess my advice to you is be very intentional on how you ask. So ask, what feedback do you have for me, instead of do you have feedback for me? I've learned that everybody has feedback for you. It's just some are willing to share it and some are not. So when you just tweak the way you ask that question, you might learn some good stuff from the people you're working with. Help others succeed. That can seem ironic if you're thinking about your own professional development and what you can do to kind of make yourself look good in your organization. But it's so important for people to know that you're not just some ultra motivated egomaniac. If you can help other people succeed, you'll usually be selected for the next important project. I've seen that over and over again at Lubrizol. The next bullet point, be comfortable living in the shadows. I have a funny video clip that I'll share about this topic. What that means, this is something that a retired Lubrizol employee had shared with me about leadership. And that's basically, the leader shouldn't be the loudest guy in the room. You don't always have to be out there in front. Oftentimes you really want to showcase the people on your team. So some people are comfortable with that and some people aren't. And my point with that tip is if you're planning on getting into leadership, you should be comfortable living in the shadows sometimes. The next bullet point is an important one about finding a mentor, sponsor, advocate, coach that can be at the place you work or outside. I think that's a great thing about ACAP is you have an extended or expanded network of people to call on. We didn't have that growing up. It was all kind of ad hoc or in the place that you worked with. So I'd encourage you to tap into this network for any topic. There's been some good ones that people brought to these sessions. The next one is communicate succinctly and clearly. That's something I'm probably not doing a fantastic job of tonight, but that's important in the workplace. We had that little knocking game and I didn't give clear instructions to Pete on knocking out a tune that everybody would know. So I failed on that one. But I think that's extremely important. Most of you on this call are very intelligent people, and you have a lot of good ideas in your head. Getting those out succinctly and clearly is important. Next one is tailored to my own learning style. We all have different learning styles. I say read, 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 never stop learning. Like I mentioned in a previous slide, there's TED Talks, there's different ways of consuming knowledge. A lot of it can be in those different channels, or it's through others. And then finally, I think being yourself is critical as well.
Hey, Joe, it's Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Really good list here. Question for you on the being introspective. So do you have any personal tools or techniques that you use for that introspection, so that you can kind of know yourself better, know where your, I guess, deficiencies lie, so you can, get better at what you're doing, or even knowing your strengths?
So I mentioned briefly this Myers-Briggs tool.
Yep.
DISC is another one. I don't know if you've heard of DISC, Elizabeth.
Yep, I've taken that.
Yep, Strengths Finder.
Mhm.
This, I don't know if you can see my cursor. That little orange bubble there is a great one to help you with that activity of being introspective. You'll get a full report that talks about your communication preferences, and some of it can be vague, but more often than not, people say, this is exactly who I am, or a lot of it is exactly who I am. And that's, one thing that I would point you towards. If anybody else on the call hasn't used any of these tools, you can either ask your HR partners at work, or you can go online and try to do some of this stuff. I'm sure there's some stuff for free. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of this stuff shared with me at Lubrizol. They've also invested in kind of deeper kind of industrial psychologists to help probe at us on various topics. There's another bullet down there, this implicit association test. That's a good one. Everybody's talking about unconscious bias over the last couple of years, and the research is early there. I could actually add a link to this presentation when I share it with ACAP that you can take for free. It's a really cool study, and you could take different types of tests there to assess your unconscious bias, whether it's male versus female at the workplace, whether it's race, whether it's any number of different kinds of domains in unconscious bias. So there's lots of tools like that I would point you to. And then the other thing I would say, it's not introspective, but you can, get a lot of feedback. I say multi-rater feedback or 360 feedback from your peers and from different other levels in the organization, I think is extremely valuable. So hopefully the culture in all of your organizations is one where people are comfortable sharing that kind of stuff. All of that helps you understand who you are, I think.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Kathy. So I agree with you. I think I've done, a lot of these as well, because my organization, it really has us doing a lot of these. But I'll tell you, one thing that I found out is my younger self versus a little bit of my older self. When I've done the Myers-Briggs and the Strength Finders and all of those, there is a little bit of a shift. And when first they tell you, I think initially when I first took it, they said, oh no, this is who you are, this, you're not changing, this is it. And it's just been very interesting to see how, we as individuals grow, and our thoughts, maybe, like you said, you're an introvert, I'm mostly an extrovert, but when I've started taking some of these, I'm kind of in the middle now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how people evolve. And I think that to me is very enlightening, especially in a leadership role.
Kathy, when we're allowed to have drinks together, I'm buying you a drink for that comment. Honestly, that's a great comment, because, there's schools in psychology that say that first tip that I'm giving you about know thyself is so dangerous. And the reason they say that is because of exactly what you said, because people change. And if you lock yourself into thinking that you know yourself and that self doesn't ever change, then it's like that whole self-fulfilling prophecy, and you feel like you have to be this individual when you're really this other changing individual. So
right, well, you're not being true to yourself either, right? I think, you're not being true to yourself, but you're also not being true to the people that report to you, or your colleagues, and what strengths that you bring. I think I've really, in all honesty, this past year, I belong to a Leadership Ohio group. It's a group that's been around for 20 some years, where you go every month for a day and a half. You go around the state of Ohio to different cities. Now, this year been a little different, COVID, we're doing it via Zoom, but we learned about all the different things around the whole state of Ohio, be it homelessness and human trafficking and businesses and Appalachia. And I got to tell you, from March when I started to, the program is ending in November, I think I've learned a lot more about myself that I don't think I knew.
Right. Yeah.
So I think you're right. You're saying about never stop learning. I think you're right. No matter how much older we get or where we are in our career, I think it's important. So I get basically my point was, thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's a good point, but also knowing that we evolve as people.
Oh yeah. Excellent point. Again, I'm buying you a drink. Good points. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. Thanks for that comment, Kathy. I'm on the gallery view, and I see Vesna Vladic is here as well. Hey, Vesna, you're on mute.
I have a question, Joe. This is
Yes.
Pete.
Hi, Joe.
Yes, sir.
So the line item that you have, communicate succinctly and clearly. How would you go about doing that? Like initially you had the had me tap out a rhythm, had people guess the song, and obviously I know what's going on in my head, and nobody was able to guess. So I deal with that pretty frequently with clients sometimes, where one manager says, "Here's the scope of work," another chimes in and says, "No, we want something totally different." And then other people chime in, and it's kind of like unclear. So
Right.
From somebody that's trying to communicate something, obviously you understand what you're trying to communicate in your head, but do you have any other kind of tools that you use? Like, say for instance, like in a creative environment, people would put together like mood boards. Here's some images of like styles that we're thinking. Here's some references for you to look at, to kind of get in the ballpark of where we're thinking for this project. So I don't know what it's like for engineering, but are there any other points that you can like bring up? Like, how do you communicate what's in your head to your team?
Right.
To help them understand.
Yep. So communication, like it spans, like what you're talking about is some very technical scope of work, right? And you could document that stuff in black and white. And we do that with different projects. And I'm sure most organizations have like a project charter that has the deliverables spelled out so clearly that at the end of the third quarter, you can give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Have you done it or not? Right? You know exactly how much you spent, all that stuff. That's easy. The stuff that I'm referring to here in the context of this leadership talk is other things, like around leading people and trying to influence change. And communication, I would say, is oftentimes misunderstood as me trying to tell my points, right? So just for tonight, not knowing, I didn't know who the audience would be. So it's going to fail for sure. Tonight will be a failure, right? Because I have no clue what the audience needs to hear and where everybody's coming from. Normally that wouldn't be the case in a professional environment. I would know exactly who I'm talking to. That's the most important thing. And it's so much more important to understand that and what they need to get out of that and where they're coming from, because your body of work is going to be something huge that they can't consume, and it's going to be some little sliver that they're after that's going to make them successful. You doing that discovery work, however it may be, whether it's relationship building, understanding their objectives and key results for that year, whatever it is, you have to nail that. And that's kind of what I'm referring to here. So to answer your question, I don't have specific tools that I employ around there. It's more of a methodology and understanding that it's more about them consuming something versus me just puking out some slides, right? That's a good point, though. I mean, I think with your work, you have to capture things in black and white with the scope of work, and any deviation from that, is a flag.
Right. Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you. Thanks for
The other thing, I mean, a lot of us, like if you're in a big corporate environment, emails, some people will write like, massive jumbo emails to senior leaders. Nobody's ever going to read that usually. If there's some specific point you have to make, make it clearly. And again, we're just skimming a lot of the topics tonight, but that whole topic of communication, again, there's people getting masters and PhDs in that.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. Good questions. I only have a couple more slides. I don't know how long these normally go. I'm guessing about an hour or until Vesna falls asleep. Still smiling there. Good. All right, we can go back to these slides. Let's see if this video thing will work. I tried a couple times today. So these videos are going to either, number one, further illustrate some of these contradictions of leadership, or they're just going to confuse you because it'll take you into my little warped way of thinking. Or the videos may not even work and you'll have to watch them yourself when we share these slides. I'm going to press the first one. It's a clip out of the movie American Gangster. One of my favorite actors, Denzel Washington. You can listen in and then I'll pause at the end and then I'll play the second video. Mata, or maybe Mata, you shout, or somebody if the video or the sound isn't good.
Excuse us for a minute, please. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. What's going on? You smile like, what is it? What's what? Huh? What's what? What is that, Joey? What's what? Yeah, that. What you got on? Very nice suit. That's a very nice suit. That's a clown suit. That's a costume with a big sign on it that says arrest me. You understand? You're too loud. You're making too much noise. Look at me. The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. I told you that. All right? What you trying to do, like Nicky Barnes and them?
Did everybody hear that? I hope everybody heard that. The punchline there was the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. And I see that oftentimes, not just in the workplace, but in other forms of our life. We don't watch too much TV, but I know there's a lot of silly business happening today in politics and economics and all kinds of things. So that's one concept that I'd like you to think about. And you can contrast it with the other video that I'm about to show. So, going back to one of my earlier points is it depends. So your leadership behavior really depends on the situation. And there's so many factors that you have to kind of weigh in on your response or how you approach a certain situation. So for sure, in certain situations, you should not be the loudest one in the room. However, sometimes, this is an extreme case, and I'm just sharing a couple clips that are cemented in my mind that I use. Sometimes in an extreme case like this one, this is 1990, May of 1990, when he became captain of the Croatian national team, Zvonimir Boban. He was playing for Dinamo at the time. He actually had to kick a cop in a packed stadium. So going from, not being the loudest in the room to doing something extreme.
U jednom trenutku igrači Boban i Skriniar pokušali su pomoći dječacima što su bili u sukobu s milicionerima. U drugom sudaru Boban je bio odbudnut i udaren od milicionera, možda neki tajni računi. Na to je reagirao Boban, isto tako grubo, vidljivo i direktno.
So some of you probably seen that. That was like burned into my mind and many people. And the point is not to go and kick somebody when you go to work tomorrow morning. but there's certain situations where you really have to stand up and fight for something that's extremely important for you or anyone in your team that you're leading. So I'll let those kind of stew in your minds. We can talk about that. And I have one last slide if it goes to there.
Yep.
And then I can open it up for questions. Again, I mentioned that I grew up here in Cleveland. I'm sure most of you grew up in a Christian community, and odds are pretty good that all of you, like I said, are very intelligent, resilient, resourceful, hardworking, adaptable. You know how to deal with all kinds of different people because you've dealt with all of your crazy cousins and family members and friends at hundreds of christening parties and birthdays and weddings and concerts and soccer games and picnics and whatever. All of those experiences, you know, in the Croatian community are really formative, and they can all be used to help you step into leadership and influence positive change. Some of the peers that you work with may not have all of that and all of those experiences behind them. And I truly think that's a big deal. Resiliency for me is actually one of the attributes that I believe we should be most proud of as a community. And I'd like to close my formal kind of talking points with a quote. I'll read it here. Resilient leaders have the ability to sustain their energy level under pressure, to cope with disruptive changes and adapt. They bounce back from setbacks. They also carry the responsibility for helping to protect the energy of the people in their teams. Leadership is sustainable only if individuals and teams are able to consistently recover high energy levels. End quote. So I thought that was particularly important, especially during these times when everybody's sick of COVID. And like I said, tired of all of the other silly things happening in the world. So make sure you're taking care of yourself and recovering your own high level of energy. I believe managing your energy is more important than managing time. So with that, I want to thank you for your energy and your time tonight.
Thank you so much, Joe. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to speak up, or I can read anything if you want to put it in the chat box. Now is the time.
Joe, it's Elizabeth again. Just, I guess, from your perspective and your point of view, how would you handle, or when would you decide to use collaborative versus directive styles of leadership?
Collaborative versus directive.
Yes, and what's, because sometimes you have to balance out various needs across the organization, and other times, decision needs to be just made. I guess, they're very competing styles. So first of all, do you default to one versus the other? And, what's your indicator to know when you should make that switch?
I definitely default into support. So I talked about that situational leadership, and if you Google that or buy any books on that, they talk about your default styles. And on one axis is, you're challenging or you're directing. The other is you're supportive. And usually I'm falling into like support bucket. And that's because most of the people that I'm working with now, I've never worked in their particular field. So they have some unique skill sets that I don't have. Nobody in our organization has it. Not many people in the world have it. Maybe 100 people in the world can do what these people do. So my default is definitely in that kind of support. But I think your question is a little bit different because you're asking collaborative versus directive. And again, it depends on so many things, Elizabeth. It depends on what you're talking about and what decision the group is bouncing around. And it could depend on, timing of a particular project. Like I'm thinking of your world. There's a time where the boss just has to say everything has to be in this standard format or whatever. And that's where that direction comes in. But, people talk about collaborating and doing some kind of brainstorming early, just to have, you know, the best ideas kind of brought to the table. And there's a whole science of inclusion and making sure that everybody's thoughts are heard. That's usually early stage in any one of those projects or activities. But at some point, the best things need to bubble out. And if your organization just keeps churning, the leader has to take an action. Jeff Bezos has a phrase that we ended up bouncing around in our organization. He says, I disagree, but I'm committed.
Mhm.
So that basically means he's watching a string of emails from his direct reports, which are all executives for Amazon. These are very intelligent people. And he might not agree with the way that group is going, right? But he sees that there's been some consensus. He might disagree, and he's the chief, right? But if he sees that's the way the team's going, he's going to say, I disagree, but I'm committed to support it, and we're going to move forward, instead of just live in this do loop of not making a decision. So again, it depends on what we're talking about, what the organization is, all those things factor into it. So I guess what's most important is having your antenna on, Elizabeth, and get a sense, are you dragging your feet and trying to get everybody to agree? And that's impossible.
Right.
Sometimes you just got to take action.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat box.
Yep.
Can you tell us more about your career journey and what kind of position you started and the different stages of your career that got you to this role and this leadership level?
Yeah, I didn't want to talk too much about myself. And I posted a lot of stuff in here. I deleted quite a bit. This is kind of my official bio that I share when I do like official Lubrizol business with external organizations. So I started as a mechanical engineering co-op, actually. So I finished at the University of Akron in the year 2000. But for 2 years, I was a co-op working one semester at Lubrizol and then going back to school. Got hired full-time in 2000. And I was a big shot engineer working, and I bought my first new car. I thought I was a cool guy, right? 2 years into that, they ended up sending me to the UK, which was at a really uncomfortable time in my life. I was just about to propose to my now wife, Ramana. And there's a funny story about us getting married in the courthouse in Painesville and having our reception at Panini's with my workmates. That's true. And then I was on a plane, and we did that so that she could go on my health insurance and come visit me in the UK. So I lived there for about a year. I came back. They sent me again in 2005 to 2006 to the UK. So I lived there for another year. And then I came back, and then I started getting a little bit disgruntled with my role, and I was looking for something to challenge myself. I'd always wanted to go out to California, and I wanted to test myself in Silicon Valley. And that's that comment there you see, working as a staff engineer for Bloom Energy. So that was a startup in San Jose. That was awesome. And to keep it kind of short, we had our first daughter, Nina, the one you met on a previous call. Maybe that's where her entrepreneurial genes come from. She was born in Mountain View, which is home of Google, actually. So lots of really cool tech companies. And I was there for about a year at Bloom Energy. And then I started getting some phone calls from Lubrizol. I had about 3 or 4 different opportunities to come back, and I'd always left on good terms. And, you know, at one point, Ramona and I realized it's time to go back to Cleveland. That's where we really want to establish our roots. California is great, but we want to raise our family in Cleveland. It's a great community. So I ended up taking that job, and that was my first official leadership position. But all throughout, I felt like I was kind of a de facto leader. At Bloom Energy, for instance, we had a lab in Mumbai, India, and they would send engineers over for about a month or 2 at a time. And every time there was a new engineer that landed in California, I would be their host for that month or 2. and I would kind of take them under my wing and train them, and then I would be their phone a friend when they returned to India. And they were setting me up to be kind of a lab manager. They shared that with me when I was letting them know I'm coming back to Cleveland. So I left on good terms with Bloom, and I still stay in touch with all those folks. But I came back as an engineering manager, and I had that role from 2008 to 2013. And then I was asked to come and lead a group in research and development. There's some good stories there about leadership, but we don't have a lot of time now. And ended up having a couple different roles in research before I just got my current role in September, which is leading a group more tethered to the business for Lubrizol's transportation technology.
All right. Who is your favorite leader of all time?
Ooh, that's an easy one. My dad.
And
So
why?
my father, we lost my dad. That's why it was funny watching my son's name. My son is named after my father, Nicola, but we lost him in 2012. So by far the best leader.
If anyone has any other questions, please speak up now. Also, Joe, is this the best email address to reach you at if anyone has any other questions?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't put my mobile number in here, but the email is the best. And like I said, you can try on LinkedIn, but I'm rarely on there. So it'll be a very slow response. Just email my Lubrizol account. And if I don't answer, within a few days, it might have gone into my spam thing, and there's a new thing they have. So I've been learning that some things have gone in there. But ask somebody on the board or ask somebody for my cell phone number, and then you could get a hold of me like that. Buy me a cup of coffee.
Hey, it's Ariana. I'm sorry, you have the whole crew here. My mom didn't realize we're on off mute. So I love the point you talk about like mentorship and sponsorship. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that and like talk about how that played a role in your career?
Yeah. So you can have, I guess, formal mentors. It depends what you guys have in your organization. We have a buddy system at Lubrizol, and then we have formal mentoring, and then we have, executive coaching. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of really good things put in place from a professional level that I could tap into. You might not be at an organization like that. Ariana, I know you are. Google has an amazing thing as far as leadership development. By the way, good book. I don't know if you read that one, Work Rules, by your former HR director, Laszlo Bach, I think. So there's some cool stuff about how Google manages people development in there as well. But, there's a lot of informal, if you don't have formal systems set up wherever you're working, there's a lot of informal mentoring that you can solicit, and I would highly recommend you do that. So hopefully you have a good boss, right? This topic of leadership, we want to have fun tonight on this ACAP call, but if you have a crappy boss or crappy leadership in your organization, that's the reason you're going to leave. So it's a big deal, and I think it impacts your personal life, right? If things aren't going good at work, people end up leaving, and it's usually attributed to their boss. So if you have a good boss and you have a good kind of ecosystem of employee development at your organization, try the formal channels. Be pretty clear with your boss about what your ambition is in your career, but be careful with that too. You don't want to jump too far ahead and just be focused on yourself. Sometimes that raises a flag with people, and they see you as just that self-promoting egomaniac like I talked about earlier. So you got to make sure you're doing a good job for what you're accountable for, but also be clear on what your ambition is and have that honest dialogue with your immediate supervisor and then those informal mentors. The other tip I would give you with regard to mentors and things like that, sometimes it's good to pick people outside of your kind of group. So if I'm in R&D, I might want to pick somebody from a different organization, whether it's in operations, whether it's in sales, whether it's in some other part. That gives you some really cool perspective, not just on yourself, but on your group. And that makes you stronger as an employee as well. So tap into those informal channels. And again, I think, like I said, in my closing comments about all the parties and craziness that we've all experienced as Croatians, we have a way, or we should have some ability to approach all kinds of different people. And that's important when you're looking for a mentor or a peer or a coach. I don't know if that helps, Ariana.
Okay, we have another question from Maria.
Hi. So Joe, this is also on some of your earliest comments about why you're involved in ACAP, and then it piggybacks on Olivia's question. But I've done a couple letters of recommendation for young people in our community, as well as for people looking for jobs. And what I've said to them was, I can't just write you a recommendation unless I know you. So if I don't know the person, I insist on an interview and, annoying questions, what would you in this kind of situation, et cetera, so that I could do an honest, recommendation. And same for like, I look at even the people on this call. There's you, there's me, there's Kathy, Elizabeth, Mara, Olivia, Kata, Ivana, Vesna, everyone's in all these different fields. And we've managed to claw our way to pretty good leadership positions. And the way that we can help the younger generation is to get to know them so that we can honestly tell them about opportunities and recommend them. So I was just thinking about that as you were talking, like, if we work with the younger generation in ACAP on projects and stuff, then we can honestly talk to your skill set and your abilities and whatnot, which we can't do unless we work with you.
Right.
So this is like,
I can go off on this particular theme because it inspires me sometimes and frustrates the hell out of me sometimes. And I don't want to quote Vesna's dad. I'll share that with you guys at another time. Maybe off the call, Anjo Kovladic taught me something, and I'll share with you guys at another point around that. But our culture still, the Croatian community, hasn't matured fully with regard to living in America and being a professional and helping each other succeed. That's my view. I think we can do so much. We're attempting to do that with these kinds of things. And I don't want to get too negative because I like to think I'm an optimist or a realist, but a year or two or three, I don't even remember how long ago it was that we had that panel. And we brought in some brilliant people, Peter, others. So we're on this career panel, and we know the career panel is going to happen, Maria, right? The date is picked. It's like months out. So rewind a little bit. I know this date's out there. I bump into people at church, at weddings, at whatever. Can you hook my son up with a job? Can you hook my daughter up with a job? I've never met them, right? So they're not even asking for a recommendation letter, Maria, like you've just referenced. They're asking for a job. And I said, sure, let's meet them, because you have to meet them if you're going to be vouching for somebody. And that meeting never happens, right? And also when I said, let's meet them, here's my cell phone number, please have them text me, call me, I'll buy a coffee, dinner, whatever. I want to help. It never happened. I would also say, hey, by the way, ACAP is having this panel. Not only are you going to have a geeky engineer, whatever, you're going to have a banker, you're going to have healthcare professionals, you're going to have lawyers, you're going to have really smart people. Go tell your son, daughter, cousins, everybody, go there. And it was like 2 or 3 students there. That depressed the hell out of me. I said it then, and I'm saying it again, because we need to get better at that. I don't know how, but I hope this is a way we can do that, Maria.
Yeah, and I think it's even like in our careers, like you're talking about Lubrizol. Okay, I'm an attorney at Cleveland Clinic and I do arts stuff, so very far from Lubrizol. But like, oh, how cool. I wonder if Lubrizol has a community relations department. Because I
Yes.
really love community relations and I'd like to get into that, you know? So we have an opportunity to help each other mid-career, transition career,
Big time.
you know? So I just encourage us in ACAP to think of it that way too. Working on projects together, we get to know each other and our skill sets and, you know, be in a position where we could share these kind of things. Because I agree, Joe, that we have a lot of goodwill, all of us, and
Right.
especially how you talked about our community. We have a lot of goodwill. We don't necessarily know the channels to capitalize on that for ourselves and for our children, you know, in my case, or our friends and their kids.
I agree. Great comments.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this too, Joe.
Anytime. What else we have, Mara?
I think that's it. I mean, we're a little bit over, but I just want to say thank you again, Joe. I really appreciate this. And I just want to put it out there. If anyone knows anyone, or if you're even interested in doing one of these master classes, please reach out to us. You can email us at cleveland@crompro.com. You can contact us on Instagram, on Facebook. If you know anyone on the board or who's a member, there's a lot of avenues. But yeah, I just want to say thank you and everyone have a good evening. And if you have any other questions, you can reach Joe or you can reach me. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Fantastic
Joe.
talk. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Hi, Vesna.
Hi, I'm trying to work this Zoom.